This week on Tip Time, we're going to cover the paddle out strategies that will help you out in bigger waves. We had a great question from our viewer Chi, who asked for any tips paddling out on bigger days, as this was something they struggled with. Paddling out in bigger waves is definitely something that holds a lot of surfers back from progressing to the next level, both because stepping up in wave size can be difficult with regards to confidence in those conditions, but more simply, getting out the back on bigger days can be an extremely challenging thing in and of itself. I've definitely been in situations where the methods I've used paddling out haven't been up to scratch due to poor timing and planning in big waves, which has led to some pretty intense moments. So what we'll do today is delve into the key components you need to be thinking about to ensure you're as effective and as safe as possible paddling out in bigger waves. There are a few key areas we do need to focus on to give you all the information here. These will include the problems we face paddling out in bigger surf, planning, what to know and what to look out for, and technique, how you're getting through the waves. Alright, hey everyone. So welcome back to another segment of Tip Time where we take a deep dive into your questions. Again, thanks Chi for the question today. If anyone has any questions they'd like to have covered on the following Tip Times, just make sure you leave them in the comments below. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to cover here today is I suppose the problems that we often see with people paddling out in bigger surf. It goes without saying, the first thing that we need to make sure we're considering is that we're not surfing beyond our means, so not surfing waves that are, I guess, beyond our experience level. And if we are starting to push the boundaries and surf waves that are, I guess, testing us a little bit, we've got to make sure we're going out with a friend. And not only that, but making sure that this person we're heading out with is experienced, knows the conditions, knows the wave. And we'll be able to show you things like where to paddle out, exactly what to do in different situations and the techniques to use and stuff like that. So I guess you can think of the little video that we're doing today as a bit of a scenario where I'm talking you through the conditions that we might be heading out into and the different things that we need to be considering as we go out there as well. So probably the biggest problems after that is just being in the wrong spot for your paddle out. So it's very easy to get caught in the wrong spot where we don't feel like we're making any headway to our getting out the back. And this will often have to do with, I guess, our planning prior to paddling out, which we're going to speak through in a minute. And the other problems are typically our technique in terms of getting out the back. So do we have all the skills with regards to paddling, our position on the board and everything like that to make it out the back? And are we making our way through the waves effectively? So are we using the right techniques there? Are we conserving or are we expending too much energy and all of these things? So let's get into our planning and what to look for there. So first thing here is we need to plan our paddle. So say we've made the decision to go out, you've got your mate by your side. The first thing you want to be thinking is there any zones that you can go out in that look like it's going to offer you a better chance of getting out the back where there's not so many waves breaking. So this will look like the deep water channels that you can see that can be really useful. Even things like rips, which act as a bit of a cheat code to getting out the back. But essentially just any areas that you think might give you a better chance of getting out the back without going through so many waves or going through so much white water. Another thing that you do want to be considering with regards to planning your paddle out is not only where the channels look like they are and where you might be able to get a good headway to get out the back, but also is there a sweep? Sweep or drift is a lot more common in bigger waves because of all the water moving. A good example of this is where I live at Bells. But what we need to do in this instance, or what you'll see a lot of the more experienced surfers doing, is actually positioning themselves or walking themselves down the beach past where they think that correct zone that they want to try and paddle out in is, so that by the time they're midway out, they're in that zone because the sweep has actually dragged them into that position, and then they've got an easier paddle out there. You can think if we've got a lot of sweep and we paddle out exactly where we think that channel is, then quite often we'll end up down the beach because we'll just have been dragged too far. So it's always a little tricky to know exactly how far down the beach to go, but look at the experienced surfers, see what they're doing, look at your mates, see what they're doing, and paddle out from those positions. It's always a little bit of a gamble as to exactly where you'll end up, but the locals and the experienced surfers tend to have a pretty good pick of it. Okay, and so now you know where you want to paddle out and where to start that paddle from. The other thing you want to probably consider is your timing. If you've got big sets rolling through, obviously you're going to be at a great advantage if you're not having to paddle through all of the sets. Now, this is a bit counterintuitive. A lot of the time, what we'll see is people paddling out when that set is over, when the waves look flat. And unfortunately, they might find that as they're paddling out, another set rolls through, they're caught in the impact zone, they're washed through to the beach, they get a bit of a beating. So we want to try and avoid that if we can. Now, this isn't a perfect rule. We won't always be able to avoid that. But something that we can try is trying to paddle out or paddling out initially when the last few waves of that set are rolling through. What this will do is hopefully by the time you're midway out, and it's not too difficult to get through those set waves because you're further in and the waves aren't so powerful, but you're midway out and then the set has stopped, and then you can hopefully get all your way out the back without another set rolling through, and then you're in position for the next set as well. So that's something to consider to make it a little bit easier, not necessarily waiting until the waves are flat to paddle out, but giving yourself that extra time to paddle whilst that set is finishing off. Just into the mid part of the break, and then hopefully once that set dissipates, then we can make our way further at the back. Okay, so we've got our planning in check. We know we're going out and how we're going to get out there in terms of the route that we're going to take. Let's go through the technique and I suppose the things that we can do whilst we're paddling out the back to make it as effective and as efficient as possible. So it's really important, I guess, that we have the fundamentals down pat here. So little things like making sure that we have the right strength and endurance to paddle through these waves. That's something that I might touch on in another video there. And then that the paddling technique is also really, really good. So again, we're nice and efficient with our paddling. That's going to be really, really important. Other things such as the technique of our paddling, making sure that we're not too far up or too far down the board. So we've got the sweet spot on that board when we're paddling. And also even getting through waves. So making sure if we are going through waves that the nose of the board is facing directly towards the whitewater. If we're a little bit off or if we're facing a little bit towards the side, it's likely that that wave is just going to either flip us over or at the very least drag us further back, which means that we're going to be further back and it's going to take longer to get out the back. It's going to expend more energy and all of the above. So definitely want to make sure that our nose of the board is pointing towards the whitewater as we're piercing through the wave as well. So our paddling's good, and now we've got to focus on exactly how we're going to get through these waves. So let's jump into this now. The first method that we use is when the waves are typically underneath that 2 to 3 foot range, when it's whitewater, and we can use that press up method, where essentially you press your chest up, the whitewater will rush between you and the board, and so that will just be a nice and easy way to get through the small to medium sized whitewater. The next thing that we want to try is the little bit of a catapult. I call it just the up and over method. But essentially what we do here is we sit on the back of the board and we allow the nose of that board to rise up. What will happen here is that whitewater will then hit the bottom of the board and catapult that nose of the board up, so you go up and over. Now, really importantly here though, is if we don't change our body position, what's going to happen is that whitewater is going to crash into the back of the underneath of the board, and it's going to flip you and the board over. So what we need to do instead is either right before the wave hits the board or as the wave hits the board, we need to shift our body weight forwards and up the board, grabbing up higher on the rails towards the nose, so that we can counteract that wave trying to push us backwards, and we can go up and forwards and over the wave. So I would say that's a good method to use in, kind of 3.5 foot range waves. Now, probably the most handy technique and one that most people have heard about is that Eskimo roll or that turtle roll, which is where as we're paddling towards the wave and we see it's a fairly big piece of whitewater that's coming towards us, we're going to grab the rails just next to our chest and we're going to turn that board over. So what this means is essentially we're going to be underneath the board, underwater, and the wave is going to rush right over us. And this is pretty good at making sure that we don't get swept in too far as well. Little things on this technique, and I'll probably do another video on this at some point, but it's just making sure that the arms stay bent, so you don't want to let that board kind of dangle or have the arms too far away. So you want to keep that in nice and close, but obviously you don't want your face and your chest pressed up against the board in case there is some turbulence and you don't want to get a knock in the head. But I find this is a really strong position if you've got your arms bent like this, kind of like you're doing a bicep curl. So just keeping that nice and steady whilst the wave rushes over you, and then you can flip it over and continue on paddling. And lastly, probably the most difficult one, we would need to do another video on this to go into this in more comprehensive detail, but it's the duck dive on a longboard. So depending on the longboard you've got, a really hard thing to do. It does involve a little bit of angling that rail as you push it down, but again, we can get into that another time. But the duck dive on the longboard, obviously we can't get quite as deep. If you're on a short board, then we can use this for, kind of 5-6 foot plus waves, but on a longboard, I'd probably, depending on how good you are, how light your longboard is, 5 foot would maybe be the maximum. But again, depends on the person, depends on the board, might be really, really strong. And then if you can't do any of those and the wave is just too big, this is where we really need to look at safely dismounting off the board. Obviously not preferable. We do need to do it in certain instances if there's no other way to get through it. Hopefully you've got a leg rope if you are doing this one, and you need to make sure that there's no one else around you. If there's anyone within your zone of where that leash or that leg rope will allow the board to go, you've got to hold on to your board because everyone's safety comes first. But if there's no one around you, then you can ditch your board behind you. Don't put it in front of you because you might risk yourself getting hit in the head or something like that. And then just do a dive deep down, let that wave pass through, and then come back up. And you can even follow that leg rope up again to find the tail of the board if it's a little bit turbulent and there's a bit going on. And hopefully with all of that, we've covered through, I guess, the fundamentals and a good breakdown of how we go about getting out the back if the waves are a bit bigger. So that's my breakdown of that, and they're most of the things that I'm considering. Again, I've had, pretty bigger sessions at Bell's where the sweep has been pretty heavy. I've actually got caught with a double set and things have just gone not so well. So it's close to my heart, and it's something that I think everyone needs to, I guess, keep on top of, especially if you are starting to push the boundaries with your surfing in terms of how big the waves you're going out in are. But once you're at the back, obviously, you're also going to be tested by surfing a new type of wave, a much more powerful, steeper wave as well. The previous video I did on the Sunday glide covers this a little bit in terms of being able to adapt your pop-up for steeper waves. And also, just move from that kind of beginner's pop-up to the advanced pop-up in those steeper waves. So that might be something you want to check out after this video, if this is the direction you're sort of going on with your surfing. Other than that, I think we'll wrap up the video for today. Again, if you have any questions, please leave them in the comments below. Happy to run through those on the next tip time, which will be in a week's time. We'll have the Sunday glide coming up this Sunday. But other than that, thanks for watching. Hope everyone's getting waves, and we'll catch you on the next one. You.